We're halfway through November. Week number 11 is upon us, and it's really at the point in the season where teams start to separate. And despite that, our Week 10 picks record was 500, 7-7, and I'll just say I'm never picking the Panthers again. I was so pleased with that pick. They returned a punt for the touchdown, they were up 7-0, and they were not able to really get anything going the rest of the game. A couple of field goals, and that was it. If I pick the Panthers one more time this season, I don't know what I'm doing. However, that does bring our overall record on the season to 91-59. So over the course of 150 games, 91 correct. We'll take that. Definitely want to improve, and hopefully as teams start to really show us who they are in November and as we move towards December football, maybe we can do just that. But the story of Week 10, following Monday Night Football, Bills offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey was fired. Joe Brady is going to serve as interim offensive coordinator. And the real reason I think that's the story of Week 10 isn't necessarily because an offensive coordinator got fired mid-season. That doesn't happen as much as people may think. It's really only when a head coach gets fired, then sometimes they'll completely change up the staff. So to retain the head coach and have the OC go out the door is something a little bit different. But when you look at what happened in that game, the Bills did turn the ball over some, but they were able to drive down, get the go-ahead score with about 2 minutes to go, and then of course all the events that followed. But 2 of the 3 turnovers, one was a ball just being stripped away from James Cook on the first play of the game, and there was a pass from Josh Allen that went right through Gabe Davis's hands that was then intercepted. Now the other interception was bad, but 2 of the 3 turnovers really were fluky at best and good plays by the defense at worst. But then, let's talk about what happened after the go-ahead score by the Bills with 2 minutes to go. There was a defensive pass interference to set up the game-winning field goal on an all-out blitz. It was an underthrown ball by Russell Wilson, no doubt, but that is where a huge percentage of DPI calls come from. Underthrown balls, the receiver has to come back to get it, DB runs through the receiver, there's a flag. That call comes from Sean McDermott, just so we're clear, and you know, that's why I say this is a big story. The OC is the one who gets fired. But then, the Broncos are able to get lined up for a field goal. They miss it, but the Bills are flagged for 12 men on the field, and the Broncos get another chance, and they make the game-winning field goal. They beat the Bills 24-22, and Ken Dorsey gets fired. I mean, a crazy series of events. And Buffalo plays the Jets this week. I haven't even decided who I'm picking for that game yet. We haven't gotten there, but they lost to them week 1. And it really makes for an intriguing rest of the year for the Bills. So I wanted to recap that. I really wanted to focus on that story because I think it's big. The Bills are generally looked at as one of the best teams in the league. And yet lately, we're kind of seeing some borderline dysfunction, some interesting decisions that typically you don't see good teams, great teams make. So interesting stuff, but let's get into our Week 11 picks, including that Jets-Bills game that we'll get to in just a moment. But we'll begin, as we always do, with Thursday Night Football, Bengals visiting the Ravens. Now, there are a litany of injuries for both of these teams, and each is coming off, I would say, a surprising loss. The Bengals lost to the Texans. CJ Stroud played great once again, and the Bengals were actually very slow to start out in that game. The Ravens had that kind of shootout, kind of not. If you really watched the way the game went, it wasn't exactly a shootout with the Browns. Ended up losing that game 33-31. So both teams trying to rebound. The Bengals in a much more dire position, I would say, at 5-4 than the Ravens. And historically, Burrow has played well against the Ravens defense. Looking at this matchup, and looking at the matchup earlier in the year in which the Ravens won, I do think the Bengals have the edge. It is in Baltimore. And I think my only, reason for pause is that the Ravens have looked so good, especially at home. They beat up on the Lions, they beat up on the Seahawks, but the Browns were able to go into Baltimore and get the win. Man, I was going to pick the Bengals in this. I think I'm going to flip. I think I'm going to go to the Ravens. John Harbaugh and the Ravens don't typically lose 2 games in a row. And I think because it's at home again, they're just going to be able to get the edge here. Short week. I'm going to go with the Ravens. I had every intention to go with the Bengals, changing my mind last minute. Let's take the Ravens to win a close one at home. So moving on to the 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff window, We get to see all 4 AFC North teams in these first 2 games, Steelers visiting the Browns. The Browns have just announced Deshaun Watson is going to miss the remainder of the season. He is set to have season-ending shoulder surgery. That came as a major surprise. Apparently he has a glenoid fracture in his shoulder. I don't even know exactly what that is, but it's apparently a big deal if he doesn't shut it down for the year and get that surgery. So the Browns are going with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the rookie, over PJ Walker, who was able to beat the 49ers, and he was able to beat the Colts. Thompson Robinson did play on short notice against the Ravens. They lost that game 28-3. This is a really tough one for me. I was going to pick the Browns prior to the quarterback injury news. And by the way, the Browns are still favored in this last I checked by 1.5. I just get the feeling both of these teams, especially now with Deshaun Watson out, both of these teams kind of are looking to play the same game, kind of ugly, ground and pound, win through your defense. And I've said this time and time again, the Steelers are 6-3 on the year. If they're able to hang around, if they're able to keep it close, they usually find a way to pull it off in the end. That's how they were able to beat the Browns the first time in Pittsburgh in Week 2. It's maybe going to sound biased, like I said, I was going to pick the Browns, but I think in a game with a rookie quarterback starting, the Steelers are, I believe, 22-4 under Mike Tomlin versus rookie quarterbacks, and one of those 4 was this year against CJ Stroud, but generational rookie talent perhaps. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is talented. We saw that in the preseason. Not sure if he's quite CJ Stroud. I'm going to go with the Steelers in this one. And really, I'm leaning on that 22-4 record more than anything else. I expect this to be a very close game. Come down to a field goal, I think, for one of the teams. Last second to win the game. In this case, I'm going to pick Steelers and Chris Boswell to do it. The Raiders are traveling to Miami to take on the Dolphins. This is a game that I'm not sure you can lean on the big energy boost that came from firing Josh McDaniels. They were able to beat the Giants, maybe not the best team. They were able to beat the Jets, who roster-wise at least are a very good team. Zach Wilson hasn't been able to necessarily produce at the level they would like. They've got offensive line issues. They've got one receiver who can really separate. There's more than just Zach Wilson. However, the Dolphins offense, I just think it's going to be too much for the Raiders defense to handle. The Raiders have played better defense as of late, but this is a different animal, and I will be intrigued to see. The Raiders are 5-5 right now. The Dolphins have lost to every team above 500. They have beaten every team below 500. I'm not sure where exactly a team that is 500 falls in that, but I just think the Dolphins are going to be able to kind of move the ball at will on offense against the Raiders, and a Raiders offense that isn't necessarily, super high flying. The Dolphins defense can shut that down. Got the Dolphins winning this one by at least a touchdown. So Justin Fields is slated to start this week, finally coming back from that thumb injury. The Bears are visiting Detroit, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the best matchup for Justin Fields to come back. Now, looking at their games last year, they were some really exciting games. Justin Fields had some amazing plays. He had some not so amazing plays, pick sixes. Those types of things aren't exactly what you want to see. I think this Lions defense is considerably better despite the fact that they did just give up 38 points to the Chargers. Kind of like we just talked about with the Raiders offense, the Bears offense isn't the Chargers offense. I don't see them scoring 38 points like the Chargers did. I think they can move the ball on the Lions. I expect this to be a fun game to watch, but in the end, the Lions have proven, the end of last year and so far this year, they are the real deal. And if they want to continue that, if they want to continue to move towards the playoffs, maybe make a push for the number 1 seed, they got to beat a Bears team that they are just simply better than on paper. They got to show that on the field, and I think they'll do that this week. Lots of divisional matchups so far, and we have another one with the Titans visiting the Jags. So the Titans are coming off a loss to the Buccaneers, and a loss where they really weren't able to muster anything on offense. The Jags themselves are coming off a loss in which they were able to muster really even less on offense against the 49ers. I think no doubt one of these teams is going to rebound, and I think looking at the two, looking at the offenses, looking at the quarterbacks, the Jags are just more likely to be the team to do that. I think Doug Peterson especially is a big factor there. I do like Mike Vrabel as the Titans head coach, but I think an offensive head coach in this situation, getting your quarterback ready to rebound from a big loss, I think it was 34-3, I just like the Jags' chances better. That's essentially going to be my reasoning. I think the head coach and quarterback duo are just better here to make that rebound from a loss. The Titans have been, kind of flirting with, maybe Will Levis is going to be their future. Maybe they've got something here, but that loss really sets them back. And I just think the Jags are trying to make a push for the playoffs. The Titans are pretty much out of it this year, not mathematically, but realistically, I think they are, and I think they know that. So the Jags have far more to play for, and I've got them getting back in the win column this Sunday. Moving to Chargers at Packers. Both teams coming off a loss. Both kind of, coaches will say there's no such thing as a moral victory, but both teams could kind of look at them as moral victories. The Packers were able to make a game out of that matchup against the Steelers. They were down 17-7. They had the lead late in the game, and the Steelers were able to come back and get the win. The Chargers, as I just mentioned, put up 38 points against the Lions. They were looking really good there and falter at the end and lose 41-38. I think the Chargers offense, this has been a theme this week so far. I think they're just too much for this Packers defense. The Chargers they are that team that they really show up in big moments. Usually not enough. They find a way to lose it, but they'll bring it against good opponents. They'll put up a lot of points, and their defense typically allows a lot of points. But I think they can stifle Jordan Love and the Packers offense enough to get a win here, get back in the win column, and keep Brandon Staley's job for a little bit longer. I do think he's out at the end of the year. I kind of don't think they're going to make the playoffs the way things are looking right now, and I just think that's going to be a ticket to probably major changes at the end of the year. But this week, I think they get the win and delay that, push that down the road for a little bit longer. Now, a potentially sneaky good matchup. The Cardinals are visiting the Texans. Kyler Murray came back last week, able to lead a game-winning drive against the Falcons, getting his first win and moving the Cardinals to 2-7. I mentioned CJ Stroud playing incredible football right now. They were able to beat the Bengals. I mean, taking out a lot of people's pick to win the AFC North, a lot of people's pick to go to the Super Bowl, and here are the Texans sitting here at 5-4 with a real chance at making the playoffs themselves. The Cardinals are out of it this year. There's no doubt about that. Jonathan Gannon, Kyler Murray, the whole team, obviously, they're trying to win games. There's no doubt. I still don't think their roster is good enough to consistently beat good teams. And who would have thought, even 2 months ago, that the Texans would be put in that good team category? But the way they're playing, the way DeMeco Ryans is coaching them up, and the way CJ Stroud is slinging it, I'm going with the Texans here. I am not picking against a guy that is playing maybe the best football for a rookie quarterback ever in the history of the league. It is incredible what he's doing. Got the Texans winning at home. On to Cowboys visiting the Panthers we go, and I mentioned earlier, I probably am not picking the Panthers the rest of the season. They let me down both times I picked them. I think it was 2 weeks in a row, in fact. And in this case, I just can't even imagine a reality in which they're able to compete in this game. The games that the Cowboys have won this year generally are just absolute blowouts, and we saw that again last week with the Giants. Now, one thing to note, the Cowboys are a different team at home. They really play well. They really have great points per game numbers, great offensive numbers, great defensive numbers. But on the road against a subpar Panthers team, I'm not sure the venue matters. I think this is going to be another blowout win. Get up early and just keep the pedal down. And I think that's going to be my analysis for this one. I think it's pretty much that simple. The Cowboys are just a better team, and they get the win this week. Speaking of teams that let me down, we have the Giants visiting the Commanders. Now, for this matchup earlier in the season, of course, when the Giants were the home team, I picked the Commanders, and the Giants were able to get the win. And I mentioned in that week afterwards, I think that was the one where we went like 5-8, that I felt like I should have seen that coming. The Giants seem to be a team on the rise. Now, I mean, they're in shambles. Tommy DeVito is starting. Saquon Barkley is about the only bright spot on the offense. And the Commanders, maybe they're a team on the rise. They're kind of a roller coaster team in a way. But they're at home this time. It was a close game against the Giants last time. I think they put up, it was 14-7 or something like that. It was a very low-scoring game. This will probably be another low-scoring game, but I think the Commanders get enough to win this one. If they can't beat a Tommy DeVito-led Giants team, they probably got to do a lot more than the expected firing of Ron Rivera at the end of the season. They already traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young, but I just think they're a better team right now than the Giants, even minus those two pass rushers, and I have them winning here at home. So on to the 4 o'clock window, with a rematch of Brock Purdy's first start, Buccaneers visiting the 49ers. Last year, in Brock Purdy's very first start, he kind of ruined Tom Brady's Bay Area homecoming. They beat the Buccaneers big time, and there have been times this year where the Bucs have actually looked better than they were last year, but as of late, they've kind of regressed to the mean. And going back to the beginning of this video, I mentioned teams are starting to show us their identity. They're starting to separate here as we get into November football, and the Buccaneers have kind of shown us who they are. I think the 49ers, after that 3-game losing skid against a good Jags team, showed us they still are among the class of the NFC. So I think the 49ers are a better team. They've gotten healthy. They traded for Chase Young. And the Bucs, Baker Mayfield, Rashad White, Mike Evans, there's flashes there, but there hasn't been the consistency. The 49ers, I know they had the 3-game losing streak, but for the most part, going all the way back to last year, they've been one of the most consistent winners in the league. Simple as that, picking the 49ers, especially at home. And so, we have arrived at the Buffalo Bills. Jets visiting the Bills at 4:25 Eastern. As I said, I haven't even picked a winner for this one. We're going to talk through it, and we'll make a decision. The Jets are now on a 2-game losing streak, and just 2 weeks ago, there was a lot of talk after the Jets pulled off that kind of miracle win against the Giants. Aaron Rodgers is looking to come back, maybe trying to get back in December. Is there a chance they're going to be in contention? Is there a chance Rodgers can take over a team that's, 6-4, 7-3, wherever they would be along that line? And can he lead them, to the promised land? Now they've lost 2 in a row. The loss of the Chargers, that game probably shouldn't have even been as close as it was. The Raiders game, Zach Wilson was kind of leading a potential game-winning drive. Then he throws a pick to Robert Spillane, and that was that. The Bills, on the other hand, the Broncos are better, I think, than maybe we've been giving them credit for. When you lose 70-20 to anybody, it's hard to look at your team in any other way, but they've been actually playing good football, both offensively and defensively. So maybe that loss shouldn't be a referendum on the Bills, but it's just the way they lost. It's the all-out blitz, defensive pass interference, 12 men on the field, redo on the missed field goal, game's lost, Ken Dorsey's fired. And it's hard to, right now, it's hard to look at them as anything else. I just think at home, it's going to be too much for the Jets and that offense. Even if it's Josh Allen ad-libbing, which has been a lot of their offense anyway, I think they're going to be able to muster enough points, and 13 might be enough. Looking back at week 1, Josh Allen threw 3 interceptions. If he can just avoid doing that, if they can take care of the football, like I said, 13 points, maybe 4 field goals, 12 points, that might be enough to beat them. I think, especially with Joe Brady coming in, that's going to be something they really focus on this week. I've got the Bills winning this one in Orchard Park. Something's got to give here, and I think it's going to be the Jets offense not giving enough. Sticking with divisional matchups, by the way, for the final game in the 4 o'clock slot, Seahawks visiting the Rams. In week 1, of course the game was in Seattle, the Rams were able to stun the Seahawks. Since then, the Hawks have been kind of up and down. Geno Smith hasn't exactly been the efficient quarterback that he was last year, but they've still been able to get a number of wins, and for a moment they were sitting on top of the NFC West. The Rams, they kind of had some positives there at the beginning of the year. Puka Nacua was the story of the league for 4 or 5 weeks, something like that, but that's kind of cooled off, and even though the game's in LA, the problem for the Rams, in the NFC West, that's already a stadium for both the Rams and the Chargers that away teams kind of take over, and it's close to Seattle. I think this is going to be 75-25 Seahawks fans to Rams fans. Is not really going to be home field advantage, which is a big deal in divisional matchups typically. And the Seahawks, I think, have just been the better team thus far. If Geno Smith can take care of the ball, I think they win this one fairly comfortably, but even a turnover or 2, I think they can overcome it. Got the Seahawks winning this one and staying in contention for the NFC West crown. So on to Sunday Night Football we go. Perhaps an intriguing matchup that no one saw coming. Vikings and Josh Dobbs visiting the Broncos, coming off that crazy win on Monday night last week. This was probably an easy pick, at least. Even 2 weeks ago, I would have just simply picked the Vikings because the Broncos, like I said earlier, were kind of still being perceived as a dumpster fire, even though they were kind of rebuilding credibility. Now with Kirk Cousins gone, Josh Dobbs has been in there and he's been playing great. But the Broncos defense, you look at what they've done since that Thursday night game against the Chiefs, they have really started to play great, which is insane because they gave up 70 points earlier in the year. The Vikings offense has been good too. This is a tough one. The Vikings do have the slight advantage of the Broncos coming off a short week with that Monday night game, but I just think Sean Payton, they've got something there in Denver right now. And I think he's going to be able to harness that and lead them to another victory at home. They can lean on their defense, and I think their defense is going to be able to stifle the Vikings' attack. So I'm going to go with the Broncos in this one. I can't believe I'm picking the Broncos. I don't know if I've done that all year, maybe other than week 1. But I got them winning this one at home in primetime. And speaking of primetime, a rematch of last year's Super Bowl. Eagles visiting the Chiefs, both teams coming off a bye. Both teams have had 2 weeks to prepare for I think what has been their biggest matchup so far here in 2023. The Eagles, and I've talked about this darn near every week, they aren't as dominant as they were in 2022. I mean, it was a cakewalk for like 80% of their games. They were statistically a bad second half team because they would have such big leads in the first half that they kind of just had to sit back, play prevent defense, and run the ball. This year, they're battle tested. They're 8-1, but they've had to work, sometimes make fourth quarter comebacks, sometimes fend off fourth quarter comebacks to get to that 8-1 record. The Chiefs at 7-2 are kind of in that same class. They've had to scratch and claw their way to 7-2, including that game 2 weeks ago over in Germany with the win over the Dolphins. That pitch six, whatever you want to call it, by the way, one of my favorite plays that I've seen in recent years. I have always felt that defenders should probably do that more, and it was cool to see it on a big stage like that. But anyway, I think two teams that are, maybe less dominant, at least in terms of the scoreboard, than they were last year. I just like the Eagles in this one better. In theory, they were the better team on paper for the Super Bowl last year. I think most people would agree, maybe outside of quarterback, they had the best roster in the NFL. And yet the Chiefs were able to win that one. I think the Eagles remember that. I think that's a big factor here. Nick Sirianni, I mean, you don't have to spend more than about 5 seconds watching any of his interviews, watching him on the sideline. You can just tell. He is a fierce competitor. From what I can tell, he takes things personally. He kind of holds grudges. And I think there's going to be a grudge here against the Chiefs. I think the Eagles win this one. I honestly think even without that, they'd probably be able to win this one. I've just liked what I've seen from them a little bit more. But factor that in, I think the Eagles get the win in Arrowhead on Monday Night Football. And that's going to close out our Week 11 picks. I really hope we can do better than 7-7. This has been an interesting year. And I feel like any given Sunday has really maybe played in more this year than any time I can remember in the recent past. But anyway, to recap our picks, I've got the Ravens winning at home tonight on Thursday Night Football, got the Steelers winning a close one over the Browns, Dolphins over the Raiders, Lions beating the Bears, got the Jags beating the Titans, the Chargers beating the Packers, got the Texans over the Cardinals, got the Cowboys beating the Panthers, Commanders over the Giants, Niners over the Buccaneers, Bills beating the Jets, getting back on the right track, got the Seahawks over the Rams, got the Broncos winning on Sunday Night Football, and the Eagles winning on Monday Night Football. So that's going to do it for this video. I've really enjoyed this. It's been so much fun to, I think, pay more attention, no doubt pay more attention to the NFL and to every game, watching film, trying to get a grasp of, are some of these wins window dressing or are they legit, and trying to keep track of just where teams really are. And I've enjoyed the interactions with you guys as well. So I think Eagles-Chiefs is no doubt the biggest game this week on Monday night. Let me know who you guys think is winning that one in the comments below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.